Imagine this. You wake up, grab your phone, open your notifications, and the first thing you see is a headline that doesn't even feel real. Netflix buys Warner Brothers Discovery. Not just a licensing deal, not just some HBO shows are coming to Netflix. No, the actual studio, the place that owns DC, the home of Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, Harry Potter, Friends, 100 years of movies and TV shows that basically raised generations of fans. And overnight, in one announcement, it all becomes part of the same company that gave you Stranger Things, Squid Game, Wednesday, and a billion next episode in 5 seconds countdowns. If that sounds huge, it's because it is. And if you're confused, overwhelmed, or low-key panicking about what this means for DC, for James Gunn's plans, for the Snyderverse, for Game of Thrones, for your wallet, and for movie theaters, you're exactly who this video is for. In the next 30 minutes, we're going to walk through what this Netflix-Warner Brothers deal really is, what they've officially said, what it means for DC and HBO Max, what changes for you in the short term, and what could happen in a few years when the dust actually settles. We'll talk about the good, the bad, and the, oh no, consolidation again. By the end, you'll know exactly what's happening, what's staying the same, and what to watch out for. Let's start at the beginning. Netflix has officially announced that they won the bidding war to buy Warner Brothers Discovery. That includes the Warner Brothers film and television studios, HBO, HBO Max, and all the big IP that lives there. Harry Potter, Game of Thrones, DC, classic films, long-running shows, and tons of stuff you probably don't even realize is under that umbrella. The reported price tag? Around $82.7 billion. Just to give you a sense of scale, when Disney bought Fox a few years back, that deal was in the low $70 billion range. So this isn't just a big deal. This is one of the biggest entertainment deals of all time level. It's Netflix basically saying, we're done just licensing other people's stuff. We're going to own one of the biggest libraries on the planet. Here's the part that surprises a lot of people. This deal does not instantly flip some magical switch. Netflix doesn't just snap its fingers and suddenly everything on HBO Max disappears and reappears on Netflix tomorrow. There's a timeline, there's structure, and there's a whole chunk of the company that Netflix doesn't even want. Because Netflix doesn't care about owning traditional TV channels. They don't want to run cable networks. They want two things: the studios that make films and shows, and the streaming business that distributes them. So Warner Brothers is doing something kind of messy but important behind the scenes. They're splitting off their linear networks, all the old school TV channels and Discovery-style networks, into a separate company that'll trade on its own. Only after that spin-off is done, which is expected around the third quarter of 2026, will the actual Netflix/Warner deal fully close. So on paper, Netflix has a definitive agreement. The deal is locked in, and everyone is now moving toward this new future. But the real "we own the keys now" moment happens a little later. That's important for you to understand because it explains why, in the short term, almost nothing about your day-to-day viewing changes. Your HBO Max app doesn't suddenly vanish. Your Netflix login doesn't suddenly show 1,000 new tiles tomorrow. Instead, the shift will happen gradually. Now, what did Netflix actually say in their official statement? This is where things start to get interesting. They made the usual corporate noise about bringing together two pioneering entertainment businesses and defining the next century of storytelling. But buried inside that fluffy language are the answers to the questions fans really care about. What happens to HBO channels? What happens to HBO Max? What happens to theatrical releases? And what happens to DC, and specifically James Gunn's DCU? Let's tackle HBO and HBO Max first, because this surprised a lot of people. A lot of us assumed that if Netflix ever bought Warner Bros., they would try to absorb HBO Max entirely and just turn Netflix into the one super app where everything lives. One login, one bill, one mega service. But that's not what they're doing, at least not right away. Netflix has said that HBO Max as an app and as a service is going to continue to exist. You'll still be able to watch new HBO series there. The big flagship projects, like new Game of Thrones spin-offs, House of the Dragon seasons, the Harry Potter TV reboot, and all the DC shows Warner was already planning will still premiere on HBO Max first, just like they were supposed to. So if you're already paying for HBO Max, nothing dramatic changes in the short term. The same goes if you're already paying for Netflix. The difference is that, over time, more and more of Warner's older content will also start showing up on Netflix. Think of stuff like the original Game of Thrones eventually coming to Netflix, older DC films, classic HBO series, older movies from the Warner Brothers library. Before this deal, the odds of something like Game of Thrones ever landing on Netflix were basically zero. Those were crown jewels that Warner would have held tightly for their own service. Now Netflix owns the vault. They can leave the crown in HBO Max's display case, sure, but they can also make a copy and put it in their own museum. So imagine a future where you can still watch new House of the Dragon episodes on HBO Max week to week, but a couple of years later, the full series also shows up on Netflix for binge watchers. Or where DC movies go from theaters to HBO Max first, then land on Netflix quicker than you're used to seeing big studio films show up there now. From your point of view as a viewer, the most likely outcome is that Netflix and HBO Max eventually get bundled together in some way. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not even next year, but once the deal closes and everything is integrated, it would make a lot of sense to see offers like get both Netflix and HBO Max together globally for a slightly cheaper price than subscribing separately. Now, the giant question mark everyone had when rumors started flying about this deal was, what happens to theaters? Netflix has always had a weird relationship with theaters. For a long time, they didn't really care about theatrical runs. Most Netflix originals either skipped theaters entirely or got tiny one-week runs just so they could qualify for awards. That's gradually changed with a few bigger releases, but still, they were never a theatrical first company. So when fans heard that Netflix might own DC, Harry Potter, and more, a lot of people freaked out. Would Superman just debut on Netflix instead of in theaters? Would Batman 2 skip the big screen and go straight to streaming? Would the next generation of event films lose that shared cinema experience? According to Netflix, the answer is no. On their conference call, they specifically addressed this fear. They said that for Warner Brothers movies that were already planned as theatrical releases, the big DC films, the franchise movies, the major event projects, they're not changing that strategy. Those films will still get full, normal theatrical runs the way they were always meant to. They'll release in theaters, play out their box office windows, then move to HBO Max, and then eventually reach Netflix. In other words, if you were planning to see Superman 2 in a theater or a new Batman movie in IMAX with your friends, nothing about that experience is being taken away. The pipeline afterward might get faster or more flexible. But the core idea of DC movies belong on the big screen first is staying intact, at least for now. Where Netflix is not changing either is in how they handle their own original movies and shows. Those will still be mostly streaming first, with only short, limited theatrical runs when they want awards or hype. So a Netflix original like the next Knives Out sequel or a big Frankenstein project might still go to theaters for a week and then hit Netflix quickly. But a Warner Brothers superhero movie, that stays a traditional theatrical event before it ever becomes a Netflix night at home. Now let's get to the heart of what a lot of people watching this care about most. What does this mean for DC Studios, for James Gunn's DCU, and for all the projects that are already in development? If this deal had happened a few years earlier, when DC was in total chaos, we might be having a very different conversation. But right now, DC actually has something it hasn't had in a very long time, an actual plan. James Gunn and Peter Safran mapped out a whole first chapter of their new DC universe. New Superman, new Supergirl, a brave and the bold Batman, shows like Lanterns and more. They're building a connected universe with a consistent tone and long-term story structure, similar to what Marvel did in the early days. So the obvious fan worry was, is Netflix going to walk in, tear up that plan and start again? According to what's been said so far, the answer is no. Netflix has reportedly told everyone that they're not going to mess with James Gunn's DCU plans. Gunn and Safran are staying in charge at DC Studios. The slate for Chapter 1 is still the slate. The movies and shows that were in development before the deal remain in development now. There's no secret plan to slam the brakes and reboot the reboot. Could things change years from now if projects flop horribly or the audience disappears? Of course, any studio would adjust in that situation. But in the near term, Netflix's strategy seems to be, we just bought this expensive, carefully planned DC roadmap. Let's actually see how it performs before we try to rewrite it. That alone should be a huge sigh of relief if you were worried that this deal meant the instant death of the new DCU. Now for the other side of the fandom, what about the Snyderverse? Could Netflix bring that back? This question has lived rent-free in the internet's brain for years. There's a dedicated group of fans that would love to see Zack Snyder's original vision continued, with his versions of Superman, Batman, and the Justice League. And people have always connected that dream to Netflix because Snyder already works with them and has released original projects there. Here's the reality. Netflix buying Warner Bros. Gives them the legal power to do something with those characters in that tone, if they want to. But they also have to think about clarity, branding, and general audience confusion. Bringing back a previous universe as the main continuity, while another one is actively being launched, would create a tangled mess. What seems far more realistic is what James Gunn has already hinted at, an open-door policy for Elseworlds and limited projects. He said he'd love to work with Snyder on a DC project if the timing and idea were right. Netflix as the owner would be in a position to say, okay, main DCU over here, and over there we have a special, standalone Snyder-directed project set in a different corner of the multiverse. That kind of thing, a one-off special, an Elseworld film, an anthology, maybe even an animated continuation, makes a lot more sense than reboot the entire company back to 2016 and pretend none of the new stuff exists. So if you're a Snyder fan, this deal doesn't guarantee your dream scenario, but it doesn't kill it either. It puts the possibility into a more realistic space. Not restore everything exactly as it was, but maybe someday we get something new from Snyder in the DC sandbox. Let's zoom back out for a second and talk about how this affects you over the next few years in practical terms. In the immediate future, the next year or two, your experience won't change much. HBO Max stays HBO Max. Netflix stays Netflix. You keep paying for them like you always have. The projects you were already hyped for, Supergirl, New Superman, Game of Thrones spin-offs, the Harry Potter series, are still coming where you expected them. What will slowly start to change is, you'll notice more Warner Bros. Content showing up on Netflix. You'll hear more talk about bundles and joint deals. And behind the scenes, the two companies will start figuring out who does what and who gets let go. Because as exciting as this is on a fan level, there's a darker side to consolidation. When two big companies merge, the people at the top usually say some variation of, we don't need two teams doing the same job. That means that when the deal formally closes around 2026 and everything is integrated by 2027, there will almost certainly be layoffs, especially in overlapping roles. You might not see that in your Netflix UI, but it's part of the cost of these mega mergers. Fewer companies controlling more of the content can mean less competition, fewer weird experimental projects that only make sense at smaller scales, and more pressure to chase safe, proven hits. That doesn't mean creativity dies, but it does mean the pressure to be a franchise gets even stronger. So is this deal good or bad? The honest answer is, it's both. It's good if you hate having a million different streaming apps and you just want your favorite shows to be easier to find. It's good if you love DC and HBO content and you like the idea of those worlds potentially having more money and more reach thanks to Netflix's tech and global footprint. It's good if you've been wanting a company with serious streaming infrastructure to take these old school brands into the future. It's bad if you're worried about one or two companies owning everything. It's bad if you care about smaller studios and variety. It's bad if you see how often mergers lead to cancellations, layoffs, and projects being quietly buried for tax reasons. The truth lies somewhere in the middle. It's not the end of the world. It's not the perfect golden age. It's another stage in the evolution of how we watch stories. So here's how I'd suggest you, as a fan, move forward from this. First, don't let every headline convince you that everything is either saved or doomed. We're in the early phase where everyone is making big promises and painting the rosiest picture possible. The real test will be what happens with the actual movies and shows. Do they keep investing in bold storytelling? Do they follow through on their theatrical commitments? Do they respect the plans already in motion at DC and HBO? Or do they start chopping things up in the name of short-term profits? Second, judge the content on its own merits, not just on the logo that flashes at the start. If a James Gunn era DCU film comes out and it's genuinely great, let yourself enjoy it, even if you're still bitter about past decisions. If a future project is lazy, rushed, or cynical, don't defend it just because it's part of your universe. Reward good storytelling with your attention. Ignore bad storytelling, no matter whose name is on the poster. Third, keep an eye on your wallet. As bundling becomes more common, the marketing will try hard to make you feel like you're saving money. Sometimes you will be. Sometimes you'll basically be locked into a bigger ecosystem where leaving becomes harder over time. Take a beat every few months to ask yourself, am I actually watching what I'm paying for? Finally, remember that at the center of all this corporate noise are artists and creators. People like James Gunn, George R.R. Martin, showrunners, directors, writers, animators, actors, who are trying to tell stories they care about inside whatever system exists that year. The system just changed in a massive way, but the fundamental goal of storytelling hasn't. For DC specifically, here's the short version of everything we've talked about. The new DCU under James Gunn is not being scrapped. Theatrical releases for big DC films are staying. HBO Max isn't vanishing overnight. Old and existing Warner Brothers content will gradually show up on Netflix. Snyderverse as the main timeline is not being restored, but future collaboration isn't impossible in side projects. Netflix now owns one of the richest libraries in entertainment, and they've promised not to nuke the plans that are already in motion. Time will tell if they keep that promise. In the meantime, enjoy the weirdness of living in a world where you might one day open Netflix and see Stranger Things, Harry Potter, Game of Thrones, and a brand new DC universe all sitting on the same home screen. Because whether you love this merger or hate it, that's the reality we're heading toward. If you're still here, I want to hear from you. Are you more excited or more worried after hearing the details? Are you rooting for James Gunn's DCU to thrive under Netflix? Are you holding out hope for some kind of Snyder project down the line? Or are you just tired of corporate mergers in general? Drop your thoughts, theories, and questions below. I'll be keeping an eye on the news and breaking down every big update as this story evolves over the next few years. Make sure you're subscribed and your notifications are on so you don't miss the next chapter of this crazy saga. Thanks for hanging out with me. Take care of yourselves. Enjoy the trailers and the shows we still have coming, and I'll see you in the next one.